By now, we all know Donald Trump and his regime invaded Venezuela. And initially, the justification centered around curbing the drug trade. We saw the images of random boats being blown up, no proof of their illicit cargo, no attempt to capture, just a conjecture framed eradication of these so-called smugglers. But what was it really about? Well, as I'm sure you've heard, it's lots of things. Millions of barrels of oil, hundreds of thousands of Bitcoin, rare earths, strategic blockades of Russia and China. And those things are true. But the big picture is the global bifurcation, or maybe even trifurcation, of the world. Everyone, including the United States, knows the US is no longer the dominant superpower in the world. And that's because of slipping dominance, both militarily and economically. Let's unpack that with respect to the military power. If there is such a thing as winning a war, the US hasn't done that since World War II. And that was really the last official war, because any action taken since then has really been a military operation, not a formal declaration of war from Congress, like the operations in Afghanistan and Iraq. Also, the US's adversaries have caught up. China has the largest army and largest navy. They also have advanced drone and nuclear capability. Russia also has advanced technology, such as hypersonic missiles, and enough nuclear weaponry to ensure mutual destruction. And then you have wildcard countries like Turkey and North Korea, who are both nuclear capable. The most powerful countries, and even these wildcard countries who are slightly less powerful than the US or China, they all understand that they are all powerful enough to ensure that if a fight really breaks out, the destruction will be so vast that no one actually would win. It's not really a wonder that Elon and Jeff Bezos want to get to Mars and to space so urgently. If you've been paying attention to the breadcrumbs the world leaders have left over the past couple of years, you'll see that all of the signs agree that the world will be run by multiple players moving forward. It's not going to be like it has been in the past or up to this point, where you have one dominant superpower. The US hegemony is effectively over. We're just at a point now where the details are being worked out. The question is whether it would be a bifurcation, the global south, meaning the BRICS nations and BRICS aligned countries, versus the global north, aka the West, or whether we'll have some kind of trifurcation, where the world is broken up into three parts instead of two. And all of this is eerily reminiscent of your favorite dystopian tale. Think the 13 districts in the Hunger Games, or Gilead and the rest of the world in The Handmaid's Tale, or Oceania, Eurasia, and East Asia in Orwell's 1984. Have you noticed the race to hoard gold, control rare earths, and build infrastructure like roads, and of course the increase in military spending? Trump just said in 2027 he wants to increase the military budget from 1 trillion to 1.5 trillion, a 50% increase. And that's because factions are preparing to be self-sufficient in their part of the world. Everyone is getting all their resources together in their little nook and cranny. It's not a coincidence that the current administration's stance is so nationalist and protectionist and, dare I say, racist. In addition to the US's waning dominance militarily, there's also evidence of economic and financial decline. The dollar's global power It was solidified by Bretton Woods in 1944, I believe, where all the countries agreed to peg their currencies to the dollar, and the dollar was pegged to gold. And then in the 1970s, the US struck a deal with Saudi Arabia to effectively force countries to trade oil using dollars. That's where the petrodollar came from. And it was the physical might of the US military that enforced this policy. But now, countries are trading for oil and other goods outside of the dollar. Countries like Russia and China. We see CBDCs are in development. And the BRICS is actively working on a new currency that will support the logistics and distribution system supported by the Belt and Road. So the US is losing power and influence both militarily and economically, while its adversaries are gaining in power on both fronts. And the part of the world that the US is claiming as its own, according to the Monroe or Dunroe doctrines, this part of the world is entangled in competitor interests because China has massive investments in South America. So what better way to mask a geopolitical strategy to impair China's development of allies and natural resources and modern day colonization than with virtue signaling? We're not destabilizing and usurping Venezuela. We're not strategically blocking our competitors from accessing resources that would make them richer and more independent from our hegemony. No, we're not doing any of that. What we are doing is we're making America safer by taking the drugs off the streets. The administration knows that they can't invade South America like they did with Libya because the world is a different place now. Everyone's watching. Social media is tapped in. X is reporting news more quickly than even news stations. So the whole anti-drug cover, this whole front, is a weak explanation at best, especially because it ignores a very simple economic principle, and that's supply and demand. You can't make the changes just on the supply side of the equation and completely ignore the demand side. You see, drugs aren't pouring in, allegedly, from Venezuela because Venezuela is a horrible nation. Drugs are pouring in from Venezuela or wherever else because there's a demand in the United States. People in the United States want those narcotics. And because of that demand, there have been suppliers that have popped up to meet that demand. So to say that you're going to cut off the supply, but make no mention of how you're going to curb the demand just goes against simple economic principles. There hasn't been any talk about alleviating poverty or a lot of the other causes we know that really lead to chronic drug abuse. And this whole Venezuela invasion thing began with the Gulf of Mexico and the control of the Panama Canal. Once the administration was able to rename the Gulf of Mexico and the public barely reacted, no one really made like any determined attempt to stop that. So it signaled to the admin that they could proceed with additional strategic moves that also impact its leading competitors. It was a signal that they could continue with these types of actions. So this isn't about drugs. This is about war games. These are chess moves being made. So what happens when Russia asserts that it can do the same with Ukraine or China with Taiwan? While the US has withdrawn its support of Ukraine, it hasn't really renounced the rhetoric about Taiwan and what it plans to do if China decides to invade. So let's watch and see what happens. But always keep this in mind. Remember to follow the money. It always tells the full story. And I'll leave you with this scripture. A feast is made for laughter, and wine makes merry, but money answers all things. Ecclesiastes 10:19. When it comes down to it, it's about money, it's about control, but it's not about the drug trade and necessarily protecting the citizens of this country. If you enjoy this type of human created content, please make sure to like, share, and subscribe, and be on the lookout for my Substack because I'll be writing some articles that go in a little bit more depth about these topics. And in the meantime, be well. Peace.